get the thing, fight it. You won't get it all, but you'll get that compromise. Looks like it.
Good evening and welcome to the study session of the Planning Commission for the City of San Clemente. Today is Wednesday, August 2nd, and I call this meeting to order. Can we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Crandall,
Here?
Commissioner Davis. I see that he's not in attendance. Commissioner McCacken,
Here.
Commissioner Prescott,
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Camp,
Here.
Vice Chair Cosgrove,
Here.
and Chair McCann.
Here. Thank you. Our study session topic tonight is on CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. We'll have a presentation from Jenna of Burke Williams and Sorensen.
All right. Hi, everyone. I was asked today to give a presentation on CEQA, which, CEQA is a four-letter word. It is a very vast and complicated law, and the case law actually makes it clear as mud. So today, though, we will have, an overview of CEQA basics. I don't think this will last the full hour, but I'm happy to try to answer questions if I can. But again, it's going to be kind of a pretty high level presentation on what CEQA is and how it pertains to the Planning Commission. But let me know if you have any questions as we go along, and I can't guarantee I can answer them, but I can certainly do some research if they are, you have in-depth questions. So again, we're starting kind of basics with CEQA, but what is CEQA? And this slide makes me laugh, but I left it in because Elizabeth told me, the city attorney told me that she did this presentation once and she got all the way to the end without the slide, and one of the commissioners raised their hand and said, "What is CEQA?" So to avoid that problem, I kept the slide in. So it is the California Environmental Quality Act. It is codified in the PRC, the Public Resources Code, at sections 2100. And also there are California regulations in Title 14 of the Code of California Regulations at sections 15,000. Background, it was enacted way back in 1970. It is based on the Environmental Bill of Rights, and it was also modeled after the Federal National Environmental Policy Act, known as NEPA. And there are some important amendments, and obviously case law changes, interpretations, but the basic framework has basically remained the same since 1970. So what does CEQA do? So CEQA is procedures and processes that public agencies have to follow. And I say that, it's important to note that and I will say that this throughout the presentation, is that CEQA does not essentially does not have environmental protection teeth, but it is procedures that agencies have to follow. And so the procedures are intended to assist public agencies in identifying significant effects of proposed project and feasible alternatives or mitigation measures to avoid or substantially lessen significant effects. So the objectives of CEQA were and are, first and foremost, they are procedures to protect the environment. There are ways the processes are supposed to help avoid or minimize environmental damage. One of the big components of CEQA is public disclosure. When the law was passed, and it's still the objective today, is to let the public know why decisions are being made, and even if they do have an effect on the environment, to open up that process so that the public can play a part. So it provides objective disclosure documents, and it informs the decision makers about the environmental consequences of the project. And again, it discloses to the public why decisions were made. So when the city has to comply with CEQA, it must identify the significant environmental effects of an action and then either avoid those significant effects or mitigate those significant effects where feasible. And again, that where feasible part is important. And this is where I was getting to, in a way, CEQA doesn't have the teeth of the environmental protection, because it does not require that projects with significant impacts be denied, provided that the city finds economic, social, or other conditions justify approval. So it's not an enforcement law, and we'll talk about this, what this means a little bit further on too. So for the city, who was responsible for ensuring compliance with CEQA? The city's municipal codes task this to the Community Development Director, and that is in section 16.04.015. So when do you all have to worry about CEQA determinations? So we have to look at who the body is with the subject matter jurisdiction over a discretionary decision. And whoever that body is, that body has to make sure that it's checking, the CEQA boxes before making a decision on that project. And who makes the CEQA determinations? Well, I already spoiled it a little bit. I said you. So obviously the planning commissions make CEQA determinations. We also have staff that can make CEQA determinations. And obviously city council will be making CEQA determinations. All right, so there's a number of procedures that we're going to go through with regards to CEQA. The first and foremost question is, if we have to deal with CEQA in the first place, is we have to determine whether it's a project. Because CEQA only applies to projects as defined under the law, proposed to be undertaken by or requiring approval by state and local government agencies. And so a project means an activity which may cause either a direct physical change in the environment or reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment. And that's PRC Public Resources Code, section 21065.
Jenna,
Yes.
could you give me an example of a reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment?
Reasonably foreseeable. So again, examples are so, do you know any off the top of your head?
So I think an example of this would be maybe modifying, and this isn't necessarily zoning, it's just the first thing that popped in my head, was modifying like vehicular regulations. If there was some type of a vehicle that we were, allowing an expanded use of, the use of that vehicle may not change, like the physical environment, like directly, but it might be that like emissions that build up over time would cumulatively have an indirect impact on some part of the environment.
Is that good? Thank you. Okay. So CEQA procedures. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Step 2 of CEQA procedures. So if we determine that what we have before us is a project as defined under CEQA, the second step is to determine, is it exempt? And there are lots of exemptions under CEQA, and in reality, the vast majority of projects will fall under one of these exemptions. So the types of exemptions there are statutory exemptions, and that's obviously exemptions that are passed down by the legislature, who says that they're CEQA exempt. Categorical exemptions, which you all deal with all the time, they are on your agendas, and we'll talk about them at the end of the presentation a little bit further. And I have some examples of statutory exemptions on the next slide. And then there's also this common sense exemption, which basically says that if a project is exempt from CEQA if it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility of a significant effect on the environment. And just real quick, categorical exemptions identify specific classes of projects that are exempt from review under CEQA based on a finding by the Secretary of Resources that those types of projects do not have a significant effect on the environment. So those come from the Secretary of Resources. Statutory, like I said, these do come from the legislature. And these slides are obviously very, very simplified. There's lots of characteristics, there's lots of qualifications, and this is just a basic list of some of the statutory exemptions. You can see at the bottom, there are many more. But some statutory exemptions, they're ongoing projects, ministerial acts, feasibility and planning studies, emergency projects, projects which are disapproved. There's an Olympic Games exemption, and a specified mass transit projects, and many more. And even when you have a statutory exemption, some of them are complete exemptions that say no CEQA required at all, and other exemptions apply to only part of the requirements of CEQA, and still other exemptions even apply to like timing of CEQA compliance. So they're not when you see a statutory exemption, it's not necessarily full CEQA exemption. Again, it requires a little bit more of an analysis than the PowerPoint is indicating. So the third part of the CEQA, or the third step of CEQA procedures, is the initial study. Also, so you know, CEQA is also a land of many, many acronyms, and there's a few in this presentation. So the initial study, you'll see it as IS. So if a project is not exempt from CEQA, then an initial study must be performed to determine the project's impact on the environment. And one note on this is it's very clear under the law that agencies can't do something like try to separate projects, or applicants can't have piecemeal projects. The law requires that the agency look at the project as a whole, and you can't try to circumvent, the EIR, the environmental report, or and try to get a negative determination by piecemealing a project. So the IS will analyze several environmental topics, which include biological resources, noise, hydrology or water quality, air quality, and transportation and traffic. So for each topic, literally a box is checked, and what those boxes say potentially significant impacts for each category, whether it has potentially significant impacts, whether it has potentially significant impacts unless mitigation is incorporated, less than significant impacts, or no impacts. And this is just a snippet of the first page from the CEQA guidelines. And you can see how the agency goes through and they check one of the boxes on each of these issues to determine whether, to determine the next steps essentially of the CEQA process. Now, how to determine significant impact? So as many things with CEQA, there's no exact science here. Again, the case law is muddy, and there is a ton of case law, and it's very hard. But in general, staff will review the project to make sure that it's consistent with industry standards. There can also be, consultation with other resource agencies to see what information they have and helpful information they have with regards to the environmental impacts, and other regulatory agencies might help with that analysis as well. So more acronyms. Step 4 of the CEQA procedures would be for the agency to prepare an ND, an MND, or an EIR. An ND is a negative declaration. An MND is a mitigated negative declaration, and an EIR is the environmental impact report. And I'll explain each of these. So for the negative declaration, the ND is if the agency finds the proposed projects will have no potential for significant impacts to the environment. And so the agency would then prepare a ND, a negative declaration. So if there's an MND, a mitigated negative declaration, there has to be no fair argument that the project with mitigation may have a significant impact on the environment. The applicant must agree to mitigation prior to the public review of the IS/MND, and the MND is for projects that aren't exempt but don't require an EIR. So if the initial study identified potentially significant effects resulting from the project, but the project is altered and or the applicant agrees to conditions which will mitigate the identified significant impacts, the agency can prepare an MND. For an MND, it must reduce the environmental impact to that less than significant level that we talked about before. And per case law, so the agency's decision to prepare either an ND or an MND, it must be grounded on an objective good faith effort on the part of the agency to review the project's potential for significant impacts. So then we get to the EIR. When we can't do an ND or an MND, when must an EIR be prepared? So when it can be fairly argued, based on substantial evidence, in light of the whole record, that a project may have a significant environmental effect. And you can see just by this kind of definition, this is subject to a lot of interpretation, and you can see kind of just from this how there could be challenges and when there's not one prepared, when there is one prepared. But the EIR is a detailed report that identifies the potentially significant environmental effects the project is likely to have. It identifies feasible alternatives to the proposed project and indicates the ways in which significant effects on the environment can be mitigated or avoided.
Jenna,
Yeah,
you love questions, right?
yeah,
That's what I thought.
especially when Adam will answer them.
Can you give us kind of a range of costs of what an EIR costs, both in dollars and
Oof.
time? And I know that the scope
is
of
an Adam
projects varies
question.
greatly, but I think it's important for us to understand the expense of these things.
Chair, that's a great question. The city does put out RFPs from time to time to solicit bids for a city consultant to prepare an EIR. It is entirely dependent on the project. Quite a bit of information is provided to those groups for their consideration in submitting a bid. I would say a general range is somewhere between $75,000 and $250,000 for projects that have occurred in recent times in San Clemente. There are definitely projects in the world that, if proposed in California, may require an EIR that costs far upwards of $250,000. But for the scale of development that we see here, that's usually the amount.
Okay, so, I just want everybody to understand, if there is anybody watching, that the developer writes that check before the city even says if they want it. If they don't, they're at risk for it. They could do that, and then the city can deny their project, all that stuff, right?
The environmental documentation that's necessary as part of a project proposal, whether it's entirely developed by a city consultant, or the applicants sometimes will pay to have their own technical studies conducted, and then the city will review those. It's all part of the expense of simply proposing an idea. And so all of the conceptual drawings that are presented, all of the supplementary information that goes along with the project, and the cost of the environmental review are all things that go into the cost of investment to simply propose a project.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you say city consultants, those are paid for by the developer, right?
Yes.
So you guys go out, you get bids, they say, hey, this is gonna be $250, and then you turn to the developer and say, write me a check or you're not starting, correct?
It's not, it's softer language than that, but
Well, okay.
essentially that's, yes.
I mean, you're not giving them a notice to start until you guys have a deposit from the developer.
Yes,
And it's not, that I want people to understand, it's not the city funding these studies, it's the developer.
it is the developer entirely.
Okay. And I don't remember, was there?
It's the developer in an applicant-initiated project. City-initiated projects will have environmental documentation that would be the city's cost.
Right, like a city soccer park or something like that.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly, yeah. So, and just refresh my memory, was there a EIR for Memorial Care?
It's the senior housing
Right.
on the hospital site, yes. So that project, there were, I believe, if memory serves me, it was an addendum to the general plan EIR. So it was not a full EIR for that project specifically, but it essentially, call it tiered off of existing environmental determinations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So mitigation measures, which we would see in an EIR or an MND. Ways to mitigate the significant environmental impacts could be avoiding the impact altogether by not taking not taking an action or parts of an action, minimizing impacts by limiting the degree or magnitude of the action and its implementation, rectifying the impact by repairing, rehabilitating, or restoring the affected environment, reducing or eliminating the impact over time through preservation and maintenance during the life of the action, and compensating for the impact by replacing or providing substitute resources or environments. And this is part of Section 15370 of the CEQA guidelines. Mitigation measures, they must be feasible and they must be fully enforceable. They have to be within the express powers of the agency. Mitigation measures have to be adopted as conditions of approval before the project is approved. The agency has to monitor the mitigation measures as well, and here's another acronym, that is the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program, the MMRP. And that's essentially to make sure that whatever mitigation measures are agreed upon, that the applicant developer are following and making sure that those are being implemented.
Excuse me, Janet, can you explain what you mean by action on a specific project?
I'm sorry, which?
What do you mean by action? You repeat that in quite a few of these. Is action avoid the impact altogether by not taking a certain action?
So I think it's just part of the project. So if there's, again, it's so hard to come up with, but if, yeah, there's a part of the project that can be maybe not done, and that would help the environmental impact, I think that that's what that talks about.
Okay, because action describes a verb normally, but you're talking about an aspect of the project.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I also think it depends, obviously, you can give the lawyer answer too, depending on the project, of course. So I said in the beginning that CEQA doesn't prevent projects from going forward, and that this is that concept of having overriding consideration. So even if the significant impacts, it's determined that significant impacts to the environment cannot be avoided or reduced, the public agency can still approve a project if it adopts a statement of overriding considerations. And essentially, that is a written statement explaining the specific reasons why things such as the social, economic, legal, technical, or other beneficial aspects of the proposed project outweigh the unavoidable adverse environmental impacts, and why the agency is willing to go forward with a project regardless of the impacts. So the next slide is, I like visuals like this. Obviously, again, really oversimplified for purposes of a PowerPoint, but it kind of shows you the pathway of where we go with a project, whether it's exempt, not exempt. And I also did want to point out that if you look at the bottom blue box, it says a notice of exemption may be filed. And so when whoever is the discretionary decision maker on a note on an exemption, if they've determined that it is exempt, the city does file those notice of exemptions. And the reason why I point that out is A, it's best practice, B, it shortens the statute of limitations for any decisions to be appealed.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
So what is the statute of limitations? Does that vary on different projects?
So it does, I can look that up. It's not a hard answer. I just don't know it off the top of my head, but it does shorten it. When a notice is, in this case, when I'm talking about a notice of exemption, it shortens it considerably, I think to about, I want to say 60 days. Do you know off the top of your head?
I know it depends on the project, but it can shorten it, I know in some cases from like 30 days to 5 days.
So it does depend.
So is that like an appeal period or,
Yes,
okay,
yeah,
and it's called a statute of limitations? huh?
yes.
Okay. And I've got one quick question.
Yeah, that statute of limitation is for the courts, not for, appealing to city, if, your decision was going to city council. I believe that's always 10 days. But that's for the, whoever is challenging the decision in court.
Okay, so the project's approved, EIR is, obviously part of that. It's challenged 2 years later. Is that possible? I mean, that normally, to me, that would seem like an explanation, a statute of limitations.
So no, so I don't have it in my notes. So the statute of limitations, I don't think it would be 2 years, regardless of whether a notice of exemption wasn't filed.
I just threw that out there as an example.
I want to say it's typically, I want to say it's 6 months and it reduces it to 30 days when the notice of exemption is filed for most projects. And again, it could depend on the project.
Okay.
I can get I can get those examples, more specifics over to you if you would like.
Well, my understanding, and I'm not sure where it came from, is that these things can be challenged, down the road. if there's a project that's approved, for instance, and there's an EIR that, or even an initial study that provides for a mitigated negative deck, that can be challenged down the line if a project, even if it's under construction. Is that the case?
So, I imagine probably in the sense, so this is why, again, this gets very complicated, because in that situation, are they challenging the decision? Are they challenging what city council approved on the project? Or are they challenging the fact that someone isn't following the MMRP, right?
Well, it could be either one, right? I mean,
Can I weigh in on this for a sec?
Of course.
Or my understanding is that, like, there's pretty hard deadlines, right? After a project is approved or or an exemption is filed or whatever, like, if someone doesn't challenge the approval within that defined window, they could challenge it after, but it's gonna get thrown out of court pretty quickly and easily, I would think.
Yes.
Okay, so then,
Good.
so then you brought something up, which is, okay, let's say then that some project's getting built, and they're not, doing the mitigation, for example, that they're supposed to, where they did it wrong or didn't do it sufficiently or something. I would think that could be kind of challenged, and then it would ultimately get worked out and rectified.
Yes.
35 days on a negative deck.
it's somewhat helpful.
And I've got a question for Adam. Who is or do we have a designated CEQA specialist or officer who makes these decisions in the Community Development Office Department? Or is it the Deputy Community Development Officer?
Cecilia Garrett O'Daly, our current Community Development Director, as any community development director, would be identified in the municipal code as the person responsible for making the agency's determination about the process, the environmental review process. However, most of staff's determinations are not considered projects, because most of what we work on are ministerial approvals. But yes, the community development director is the lead on that front.
And the municipal code does provide, I don't think I had it fully in my slide, but it says or her the designee. So she is allowed to delegate that authority.
And I was wondering if if that had been done.
Well, I think in the municipal code, for instance, when we have the zoning administrator who can approve ministerial projects at the staff level, I think that's an example of the delegation of those responsibilities. And Commissioner Camp, I will send you an email with some more information on this, the statute of limitations, because I apologize for not knowing that, and I feel like you're not satisfied with my responses.
And
So,
just looking it up, it's going to depend on the action.
yeah, it
If it's
is.
a negative deck, it's one thing. If it's mitigation measures, it's another thing. If
Right.
it's a full EIR, it's another thing. So they're all different.
They are, but I can certainly find some information and send it over.
And just to finish Commissioner Cosgrove's thought, we do file exemptions, we do file notices of exemption for categorical exemptions as well, and that's got an even shorter time frame for appeal.
All right. So when the agency decides to, on a ND, an MND, or a EIR, again, there's this aspect of CEQA that requires and opens it up to the public. So there is a public comment period. It does vary for each of these procedures when we get to this stage. And then once that is closed, the city or the public agency, finalize it, and then it's brought to the discretionary decision-making body to make a decision on it and on the project and certify the CEQA documents.
Jenna,
Yes?
can you give us any kind of generic time frame of, okay, if it goes through if it's a neg deck, it's going to take, this long to do the initial study and make that determination, or a mitigated neg deck, or an EIR? Because I know there's timeframes for review periods, it must be out for public comment for this long, and then they have so long to long to
Yes.
respond, and then,
So for ND and MMDs, there are specific lengths of time that have to be followed, and the EIRs do not have specific lengths of time. Well, public comment does, but overall the EIR does not. And that's kind of why you see some of these EIRs taking a significant, they're usually very big projects and it's a lot of work, as Adam, we discussed earlier. But I don't, and I can get you the timeframes off the top of my head, for the NDs and the MMDs.
but based on your experience, so if someone has to do an EIR on a project, what's kind of the minimum amount of runtime that's going to take from when?
I think, off the top of my head, I'm thinking a year. But it really, again, depends.
You're asking about how much time the
Total.
production of an EIR will add to the processing time of an application?
I'm saying from, once it's determined, hey, we need to do an EIR, so then there's going to be approval time to select consultants, to have the consultant and, authorize them at council, then do the report, then it goes out for all its various public reviews and review periods and stuff like that to get back to planning commission or council for an approval action. What's the minimum amount of time that would take? Just a ballpark.
Yeah, minimum, I would say it's probably between 6 and 9 months.
Okay.
But on average, if we know a project is going to go through an EIR process, we're generally telling people it's a year, maybe a year and a half,
Okay.
depending on the project.
Thank you.
I have one more question on this. I think this Memorial Care project is an interesting sort of a case study, because there was a public review period on the city's EIR, and then this project was piggybacked. In other words, its EIR was made a part of that, is what I understand, some sort of an addendum. Wouldn't that also have to go through the same public review period, even if it was an addendum or sort of piggybacked on to the city's EIR? Just as an example.
So without knowing the details, my inclination would be, yes, but again, I think the projects can be very complicated, and CEQA is, again, not, so I don't know the details of that particular project. I don't know if Adam has further insight.
Well, this was a new procedure for me, that I had heard, and, only been here a couple of years, so I haven't heard that much, but any project that would be piggybacked or added as an addendum, it seems like would have to go through that same public review process, just even as an addendum. I'm not saying that project specifically, just as a case study.
I think so.
Yeah, I hate to harken back, but it really is going to depend. Yeah. So, go ahead.
The addendums do not require a public review.
So that's sort of a shortcut.
Well, it's a method. It's a method of establishing the environmental review based on previous environmental documents or environmental impact reports. It's essentially adding additional information to identify how the previous EIR, the scope of that covers the project at hand. It's,
Yeah, I suspect
it's
we're going
not
to get to
a-
the bottom of this. But, you know, the specific information about that project, whatever that project is, that's being added, was not evaluated. I mean, typically, you're not going to know what's going to go on that site, even if that site was part of the initial EIR, especially if it's a broad-based EIR. So I don't know, if you could do a little research, Jenna, that.
On
that'd be-
that particular.
Yeah, just, there should be something on that, because I think it's probably not that unusual to see this kind of a procedure. I don't know.
Yeah, addendums are not, you know, terribly rare.
Yeah.
You know, while I understand it's a unique process, as far as, you know, the specific types of review processes we're discussing tonight, it is an established procedure in CEQA. While there may not be a public review comment period on addendums, there is always a public review period in the fact that the final determination is made by the ultimate hearing body, and they can't make any decision on a project that is not publicly noticed and given an opportunity for the public to comment. So there's always some type of public review, but yes, not the same comment periods that are required for EIRs.
Okay, so what does this all have to do with the Planning Commission? I did want to just note the Brown Act. There's been a fair amount of litigation regarding CEQA and the Brown Act, and you might, for those of you who have been here for a while, we made, when Elizabeth came on as city attorney, I think she made some best practice changes with regards to, there's recent case law that says we have to put CEQA decisions, obviously, on our agendas, but that includes exemptions. So that's why you see, I don't know if you've noticed, but we have included those on all the agendas, and including tonight's. And then obviously, as discussed, the Planning Commission is responsible for determining exemptions, and can be also responsible for certification of CEQA documents when you are the subject matter jurisdiction on those decisions. And just some common categorical exemptions. Class 1, I know you've seen these, but that's existing facilities. Class 1 consists of the operation, repair, maintenance, permitting, leasing, licensing, or minor alteration of existing public or private structures, facilities, mechanical equipment, or topographical features involving negligible or no expansion of existing or former use. And the key here is that it involves negligible or no expansion of use. And those are some examples. Again, there's qualifications and characteristics of these examples, and an additional 12 more that are in the CEQA guidelines at this time that wouldn't fit on my PowerPoint, of course. Class 2 is the replacement or reconstruction. Again, I since the time I've been with you, we've seen these, and consist of replacement or reconstruction of existing structures and facilities where the new structure will be located on the same site as the structure replaced and have substantially the same purpose and capacity as the structure replaced. And there's some of the examples of Class 2 under 14 CCR Section 15302. Let's see, Class 3 is new construction or conversion of small structures. Class 3 consists of construction and location of limited numbers of new small facilities or structures, installations of small new equipment and facilities in small structures, and the conversion of existing small structures from one use to another where only minor modifications are made in the exterior of their structure. And there's some examples for Class 3. And finally, one that we will run into at the Planning Commission probably quite often is Class 31, which is the maintenance, repair, and rehabilitation for historical resources in a manner consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. Oh, and one more, in the infill developments under section 15332, which refers to building within unused and underutilized lands within existing development patterns, typically but not exclusively in urban areas. Okay. So when we're looking at these categorical exemptions, we look to make sure that they meet a class description, that there's no cumulative impacts to the environment, and there's no reasonable possibility of significant effect on the environment due to unusual circumstances. And then finally, the Planning Commission can see the CEQA documents themselves. They can, of course, the Planning Commission, there's opportunity to discuss the CEQA issues, environmental issues during the comment period, but also you might see them depending on the decision on the project, if it's within your subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. You might be making decisions on those, and or certifying those documents, or most likely a lot of the projects would be within your role of recommending the projects up to the city council. And that is my last slide. So if you have any more questions, let me know.
Are ADUs exempt from CEQA?
They typically are, yes, dependent on the project, of course. And ADUs also, as you probably know, those can be ministerial decisions of the zoning officer. Is that who makes those? Sorry.
Yeah, so ADUs are exempt from CEQA, which is in line with the fact that the state's housing policies are essentially geared to try to make them ministerial approvals. However, there are some times where ADUs can be proposed that don't meet ministerial, the allowances for a ministerial approval. If there is a discretionary decision that needs to be made on an ADU application, then that would be an action subject to CEQA, because that's not a ministerial action at that point. We could, since I know there's some subject matter on this later tonight, if there's some additional questions, we can field them at that time.
Thank you.
Jenna? That's okay. Very good. I want to know if you've ever heard of a case like this. I had a project, and it was for 86 houses. Mm-hmm. And the city attorney determined there should have been some, basically just traffic fees to be paid.
Okay.
But the city attorney, not representing your firm, by the way, said, so we should have just had to pay traffic fees. But they said, well, we're not going to let that be fine. You have to construct the improvements. And it was having like a 3% impact onto an intersection, for example. They said, what if you pay fees into the fund, but then the fund never builds the improvements? So then you never really mitigate anything if no improvements ever get into the ground. So therefore, that's not good enough. Paying fees is not good enough. You have to build the improvements. Is that valid? Have you heard of stuff like that?
So I don't know if I've heard of that exact issue. I think that, however, there's a lot of issues. CEQA is somewhat subjective, right? And it's the city trying to follow the procedures and determining, what mitigation measures, or a public agency or whoever else, a related public agency, or what mitigation measures would sufficiently reduce the environmental impacts. And so I don't know who that city attorney was, but do I think that, I don't know if that's really, unheard of or uncommon.
So it's, I guess the question is it standard practice to treat things that way? Because to me, there's, it's very unfair to any minor, development to put the full burden
Yeah.
of an improvement on them.
Yeah.
It's like nothing would ever get built.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer for that one. I see where you're coming from.
So it's
though.
not standard practice?
Standard
It's up to
practice.
the city, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have no more questions. No one else? Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Jenna. And with that, I'd open a motion to adjourn this meeting. Okay. Do I have a second? Or do we want to keep going? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes 6-0. It says adjourn to the next study session on August 16th. Do we have a study session on the 16th, Adam? I don't see anything on the TFA.
I don't think there's anything listed on the TFA. We are looking at a couple possibilities, so that'll be fine. If something changes, we'll just simply notice the meeting.
Okay, so we
appropriately.
adjourn to the meeting on August 16th at 5 PM.
Yeah.
Okay, so adjourned. Thank you. Good evening. I call this meeting to order of the Planning Commission of, today is Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. And Commissioner Camp will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Crandall?
Here.
Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Commissioner McCacken?
Here.
Commissioner Prescott?
Here.
Chair Pro Tem Camp?
Here.
Vice Chair Cosgrove?
Here?
Chair McCann?
Here. Thank you. There are no special orders of business. Minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve for the study session, prior study session. Is that for June 21st, Adam?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then for the regular meeting of the Planning Commission of that same June 21st date. Can we do both those with one motion to approve both of them, Jenna?
I need to abstain on one of the,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would do them separately.
Okay. So I'm open to a motion for the minutes of the study session.
Move to approve. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any,
abstain because I was absent.
okay. One abstention with Commissioner Prescott Loeffler. And then I'm open to a motion on the regular Planning Commission meeting.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Those items pass. Thank you very much. Oral and written communications. Is there any member of the public here that would like to speak on an item that is not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Moving on. Item 7, consent calendar, 7A, 7B, and 7C. Do we have any public speaker notes? Okay. I have a speaker card for Dan Bunce for 7B, which is the red curb at Faro. Is there anybody that's wanting to discuss any of the either red curb items? Okay. I'm sorry, sir, which one?
134 West Avenue, Cornelio.
Okay, Cornelio, and sir, you? Cornelio also? Okay, so there's no one here to speak on the red curb on Estrella?
Let's see, yeah.
No one? Okay. Does anybody here want to speak on, pull off 7C, off the consent calendar item?
I'll move to pull A and B,
Okay,
assuming you want to talk.
yeah, for sure. Do we have a second? I'll second that. So we'll pull 7A and 7B off the consent calendar. That means we will talk about them in detail.
And to approve the balance of the rest of the consent calendar.
That's probably a separate motion at this point. So approve 7C. Is that your
Well,
motion?
my motion would be to pull A and B,
Okay,
but to approve the balance of consent calendar.
okay. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, great, thank you. So, 7A, red curb at West Avenida Cornelio, at Avenida del Presidente. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, we have Ryan Kim and Zach Ponson from Public Works to present on this item.
Good evening, Zach Ponson, Assistant City Engineer, and Ryan Kim, our Senior Traffic Engineer. On consent, we don't have a staff report. We do have the exhibits that we can pull up if needed, but we're here for any questions, or we can give you a brief summary of what we're proposing tonight.
Yeah, I would say, can you please give us the exhibit and just a brief summary of why it's being proposed?
Want to sit down?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ryan Kim, Senior Traffic Engineer. I'd like to present brief presentations regarding the red curve on Avenida Cornelio at Avenida del Presidente. The main reason for this red curve is for the enhance the sight distance and the visibility for drivers, especially from the Avenida Cornelio. Currently, we have one through traffic lane plus one bike lanes on each side along the Avenida del Presidente. So residents have raised the safety issue and requested to install a red curve at that specific locations. So we came up with the 10-feet red curve at the northwest corner of that T intersections. That's all. I'm ready to questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for staff?
How did you come up with 10 feet?
Uh,
36 overall, but just kind of,
Yes.
everybody knows kind of what
Yeah,
you're thinking.
there are two. One reason is that we like to save some parking space too. We have citywide parking issues. So to minimize red curve and extend some one, at least save one parking space, we came up with the 10 feet.
And this was requested by resident.
The whole requested, yes, but not the specific length of the red curve.
But they were saying there was a sight distance issue at the intersection.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the 26 feet could probably park what, 2 cars?
I expect one car.
One. Okay, and then if you go towards the freeway from the proposed red line, that's an Americans, that's ADA cut, curb cut,
Yes.
so nobody can park there.
No.
And then what's after that as you're going, I don't know if that's north or south, but as you go parallel to the freeway? Can you park there? No?
No, it is, there is bike lanes, so no
So it's a
parking
red
is not
curb or a
allowed.
no parking sign?
There is a bike lane sign must
Yeah,
be there.
but so that means there's a no parking sign there then?
Yes.
Okay.
What's normal for a right-hand turn like that? I mean, it's just a right-hand turn.
Depending on the radius of the curve, but so it's a case-by-case difference, but at least this one, based on the also approaching speed of especially along the Presidente, so we calculate the stopping sight distance, so we came up with this 10 feet.
Ryan,
Yes.
is the issue line of sight from the limit line on the other lane that might be turning left or right? Basically here, right there at the limit line?
Yes.
That's the issue?
Yes.
Left turn.
Yeah, okay. So what Is it your observations that there are line-of-sight issues?
Yes,
There is,
Yes.
okay. And is it due to cars parked on the other side, too close to the intersection?
yes. It could also encroach blocking the pedestrian domes.
And so you're saying you've observed vehicles parked on the other side encroaching on the crossing area, pedestrian crossing area?
That's possibility.
What is, do you know offhand the California Vehicle Code for what's permitted with respect to parking on intersections like this? What the distance is from the turn?
We don't have specific distance, but rule of thumb is that curve side is not allowed to park. Only straight lines.
So on the curve of the curb, no parking?
Correct. At the intersection, yes.
Okay. Is your 10 feet on the curve, or is it past the curve?
It's a part of the curve,
Part of curve?
yes.
So the part of the curve that you're painting this on, according to California Vehicle Code, is already illegal, but you're providing this as a visual aid to remind drivers, please don't park here.
Correct.
How much of your red curb is, your red line, not on the curve? Do you know offhand? It's hard to tell, because it looks to me like almost all of it is, maybe a foot's not. Yeah, okay. And then is it your intention is to leave then a full car length of parking just after that red line and prior to the drive aisle there?
Correct.
Got it. Thanks.
Can you tell me anything about the speed that cars are traveling on Avenida del Presidente? Is that posted 25 miles per hour? Is it posted above that?
I don't recall exactly, but it seems it's 30 or 35.
30.
Okay.
I can check if you want to ask another question.
Well, I'm wondering if you have any experience of that there's like speeding along there.
I do know in the past. We have received several complaints of speeding on that street,
Okay,
especially from the houses lower end that actually reside right on that street down in the
Right.
dip. I know we've gotten those a couple years back.
right. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the?
I just had one other question. Do you think the limit line, while maybe normally where you install it, do you think there's opportunity to, if you were to redo it in whatever next cycle is, pushing it up further? Just based on where I'm seeing it here, it does seem, I can see where maybe just the virtue of the placement of the limit line in and of itself may add to or contribute to line of sight issues. It's as far back as it is. Just based on this illustration that we're seeing here submitted by one of our citizens that sent that in.
Back or forward?
Forward.
You can't put it up by the handicap ramp.
Yeah, there's a little ramp right there, I think.
You can't go across.
You can see it on the
88.
diagram.
It's curb cut.
Yeah, gotcha, it's level with that. Yeah, this staff report picture doesn't jive with this picture. Because I don't see the handicap ramp on this picture.
You can see the grooving. It looks like maybe it's even in front of the,
No, I just don't, okay, maybe
that
it's
might be
just,
the flat part.
Okay.
Of the
Gotcha,
float of it. I
okay.
don't know. It's hard, you can't tell.
because I was looking for that like indicator, like
Right.
that surface.
Yeah, you can't tell.
Yeah.
Can't,
Tow
yeah,
path through that BMW or whatever that is.
yeah. All right.
To me, the line is-
And then looking on that same picture, if you look
What's that?
from
You can see it in the picture.
You can?
Avenue across the street.
So does the commissioners have any other questions for staff?
I'm looking over here.
Okay.
This is all red curb.
I think there was a couple people here that would like to speak on this red curb at this location, is that correct? Okay, great. Have you filled out a speaker card? Awesome, perfect. If you can please give that to Eileen, and then we'd love to hear from you. There's a 3-minute time limit for all speakers. The red, yellow, green traffic themed light will, you can go to the microphone, sir, because we want to make sure we get your comments on the record. When the yellow light comes on, you have a minute left.
Okay, so I'm Ron Rodriguez. I live at 134. I live in that corner house. So I've lived there over 20 years. And the 20 years, they've taken all the parking from the front of my house and are now trying to take away the last section of parking that I have. And I wrote an email talking a little bit about my son back in 2018 when they were doing it. And Ben Parker came out and approved the curb not being painted. He said that street was wide enough to leave it alone. And as far as the curbs being curved, past that rise for the handicap, it's straight. It's actually starting to go back the other way. So it is straight, running straight down the line. I was when I sent the pictures. So if you're at the limit line and you're pulling out onto Del Presidente, you still have to creep way past the curb to see anything because you just can't pull out from there. It's not safe, obviously. And the reason I'm really worried about it is I have a special needs son. He's 27 years old, nonverbal, still in diapers, and he has caregivers that come 5 days a week. I wrote that in the email. I don't know if everybody got to read that email or not, but that's the concern. If his caregiver, for whatever reason, has to park down the street, he has a really hard time walking. So they would probably have to double park or something in that bike lane, do something to get him in the house. There's no other way to do it. I really don't think he could walk half a block. I mean, he could, but it would take a while. It would take 15 minutes or 10 minutes. But did you see what I wrote, the emails, though? I sent an email from...
We've received your email.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't want to be redundant talking about something, but...
Well, feel free. This is your chance to express yourself.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm really worried about my son Michael and caregivers, because like I said, nonverbal, still in diapers, general refractory epilepsy, and, he's kind of going downhill a little bit. So we have people coming 5 days a week to take care of him, and they got to park somewhere. And the same people that are complaining about the car being parked there, they're going to start complaining about me or them parking down the street to make accommodations for my son to get in and out of the house. That's my big concern. And I showed the one picture as you're looking down Cornelio. It is wide enough for two cars. You can see the double yellow line. You can see space to the right of it. You can see space to the left of it. The problem is people come barreling down Del Presidente and, have always just, tried to go in there too hot, I think. But as far as being able to make it around the corner, the delivery trucks make it around the corner, fire trucks go around the corner. I mean, it can be negotiated. I still think there's plenty of room to get by there. So as far as the curb part, I think where that BMW is parked, it's going straight. That's my vehicle, and right now it's a straight line down there. Yeah, so some people bought the house 2 houses down, and they seem to take that all up, and I don't know where I'd park. And you took away my parking
Okay.
when I bought the house 20 years ago. It's my last spot to park.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
All right, thank you for your time.
But don't go anywhere, 'cause I think
Okay.
we have a couple commissioners who want to ask you a couple questions.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sir, that's your car, the Mazda or whatever it is?
Yes.
There's two cars parked there, though.
Yes. The vehicle in front of it is my neighbor's vehicle.
Okay.
They're the
So-
house below me. I think they're 136. I'm 134. So I'm the corner house. And as you can see, that's the last spot I have. When I bought it 20 years ago, I could park on Del Presidente and then down Cornelio.
So you're saying the diagram is wrong? Because it shows the curve starting at the 26 feet, unless that other car is blocking the driveway. Those two cars are not
Yeah.
going to fit on the
Well, no,
straightaway.
26 plus 10, 36.
36.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see
but
what
the
you're
curve
saying.
is already starting. You
Right.
said that's flat, that's straight all the way out.
It seems to be, yeah, it seems to be straight.
That car in front of your car, it's got a cover on there.
Yeah, they put a cover on it. It's a classic car, so they
Every
just.
night?
No, it's not parked there every night. It was just at that time and had a cover on it. That's my neighbors. They have young kids or kids around, college age, and they have like 3 or 4 cars. So parking's a premium right there. And then the new neighbor that bought the house, one house down from them, they have one of those big Mercedes, wagon things. So that's parked there, and most of the time it's taking up that whole space. You might be able to get a car behind it. Sometimes my neighbors put a car behind it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner
I just want-
Cosgrove, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Your driveway for your son access?
Yes.
Can you use your driveway?
Yes, I have a 3-car driveway, so I have 3 cars. So if they're all in the driveway, my caregivers got to go somewhere. Or I have to pull my car out and go down the street and try to park somewhere so they can pull in.
Yeah.
Do you have a 3-car garage?
No,
Do you have any garage?
yes,
But it sounds like you're not parking cars in your garage.
no.
Okay.
I kind of use it for an office and all-purpose room.
Do you have any other questions?
Not for him, no. Oh, well, other than, what your argument is that 26 feet that is left open for parking.
Mm-hmm.
What's your argument? You need more?
No, my argument is none of that 26 feet is in front of my house.
It's not?
Only the 10 feet is. I'm 134.
Oh, gotcha, okay.
He lives here.
No, so
Gotcha,
basically,
okay.
you're taking away the last place I have to park legally. Unless I get to park in the planter with all the rocks in it.
Any other, did you have more questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Rodriguez.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this issue? On this issue or a different one? This issue. Please come up. If you give Eileen your card. Thank you. Mr. John Neal, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a resident on Avenida Cornelio down the other end. I use that street a lot, as do many of my neighbors who signed the petition requesting this. And I appreciate Mr. Rodriguez's situation with his son, totally. However, it's really a safety issue in terms of negotiating that intersection. There have been near misses especially with folks on bikes coming down Presidente, because they're even farther over, so you literally cannot see them while you're coming out. So I'm just concerned that somebody's going to get hurt. As far as Mr. Rodriguez's son, I'm wondering if the issue is dropping his son off, could that be a white painted curb so that there would be temporary parking to resolve that issue? That way his son could get out at that curb, but you wouldn't have people parked there for a long period of time. Because that's really the issue is, for a while there was a pickup truck with a topper on it, and you literally could not see around it at all. It's not quite as bad with the little BMW sports car, but the problem is you have no control over who parks there. And so if it's somebody with one of these big Sprinter vans, you're not going to be able to see anything coming out onto Presidente. So, I like the proposal as it is now. I think it's interesting that that curve actually is illegal to park at. I didn't appreciate that. So all you're really doing is you're extending the no parking zone a few feet, if at all. And oftentimes there's nobody parked in front of that house. So, and on the street, it's first come, first serve. We've got a lot of parking space in front of our house, and sometimes there's people parked there and sometimes there's not. So I don't know that just having a space out in front of your house entitles you to have that parking space all the time. So again, I really would suggest that the safety factor be the primary consideration in this. And I appreciate the time of the Planning Commission's, Planning Council's time.
Thank you, Mr. Neal.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Neal? No. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Oh, I have a question. You said there was a petition. Approximately how many people signed the petition?
I think it was 6 or 7, something on that order of magnitude. There was one person that signed that then took their name off because they were worried about, neighborhood relations, et cetera.
Okay.
So, but anyway.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We didn't need to open a public hearing, right?
No, this isn't a public hearing because it is a recommendation to council. I think it's been noted in the record, but just also please note what the public comments that you did receive in writing. You don't need to read them in, but.
Okay, yes, we did receive public comments in writing as well. I have a question for staff. What do you think about Mr. Neal's idea of having a designated loading zone there in that space instead of red curb?
I can't think of a similar use of something like that in a residential area in the city. Enforceability of it would probably be very difficult. You're now asking the police to kind of check one stall in the southwest area of the city. If it was deemed like an ADA stall, it doesn't have a proper landing zone, because that's why you don't have those in a street without a proper landing zone in the street, in the sidewalk and stuff. So we couldn't deem it an ADA stall. It's a unique idea. I don't know if we would have it be what we would call it, or what it would be, other than a loading zone to a residential house for a temporary time period. I don't know. That's a very unique situation. You can add it to your recommendation for consideration, and we can think about it before city council, if that's part of your recommendation. But it would definitely be a very unique situation, especially for enforcement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Commission discussion. Does anybody want to lead us off?
I looked up, so a Toyota Tundra, it's 19 to 21 feet. You can't get 2 of them there anyway. If you put them tip to tip and add them together, you can't get 2 Toyota Tundras there. So presuming there's 2 small cars that are going to take up that space. And to Mr. Neal's point, if you have a big SUV there or a truck with a camper and somebody gets clocked and killed and there's other things I could say on other subjects that we heard, but I think that's 26 feet is adequate for 1 car. I don't know if it's realistic to put 2 cars here as it is, and it is a safety concern, obviously.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So the danger is somebody coming down Presidente and then turning right on Cornelio because you can't see somebody who might be out in the street?
It's
No.
this, it's this driver
The
here.
danger,
Well, if you look at the picture here, how can you not see?
The bicycle coming about 20 miles an hour.
No, but if this is the problem, right now you can see, because that car,
That's
That-
the front of their car.
yeah, that picture's not taken at the driver's head location when they're
Here.
legally stopped
driver
at the
will be
limit
like
line.
here.
And you
and you're
put a
looking
truck
that
up
way.
there.
well, you're looking here, you're looking for cars that
Yeah,
way.
Right.
right.
So you're looking like this, not like that. And there's the cut. I mean, you're saying these guys are parking out into the ADA cut?
Right on the edge of that.
Well, even right on the edge, you can still see
I don't
this car here.
But
They're calling it.
I would think the danger is somebody coming this way, and they're riding their bike right here, and you can't tell that if you're going real fast, you're gonna hit that person who's in the middle of the street. Right here, hidden by the blue
Yeah,
car.
that dude's going the wrong way if he's going that way anyway.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't deserve you
Well,
to
I
get
mean,
knocked
come
off.
on. But
I
So
think
how-
this,
oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think this, I mean, the picture can't lie that much. You can see,
The angle can, because if you look at the
Yeah.
plan, view, there's where somebody would be stopped.
at the black line.
Behind the white line, that, where we have the 10-foot road curb, if there was a car parked there, it would definitely block your view. I mean, just draw a line.
Particularly bicycles
Just
coming
draw a
at
straight
35
line.
miles an hour.
Even at 36 feet, it's hard to get 2 cars there. You get 2 sports cars, no doubt.
Can I say something?
Well, sure, but the car you're looking
Let's
at
give
is
him a
here.
chance to finish.
So
But
why are
you're-
you looking there when the car's there?
No, but you're worried about the car that's
Well,
200
how-
feet
yeah,
closing
back
at a
here.
high rate of speed down here.
Yeah.
That's what you're worried about.
And then you pull out and all of a sudden they're on.
Or the kid that's on an e-bike and cruising along and he's hard to see.
I have a question.
Let's see if, Commissioner McCacken, are you, have more to say, or we'll come back to you? or-
Anything else to say?
Okay.
If we reduced it from 10 to 8, would that still be, contribute to adding safety? And
Enough
add,
room to park though.
Doesn't make a difference.
doesn't make a difference?
We could look at reduction of it. It'd be something we'd want to do in the field in between here and city council recommendation. So if that's part of your recommendation is to look at consideration of how low can it be? In general, we always have kind of already looked at how low could it be, and we're trying to get it off that curve. But if
And
part of
10
your recommendation is to go back, look at it, see where the straight curb is versus the curve or the radius. I was able to pull it up on Google Street View while he was bringing it up. It is somewhat straight, but it has a little bit of a curve still. So it might be this fine line of a compound curve where 2 curves join each other.
Well, yeah, the streets aren't at right angles, so
It's a-
that's
yeah,
the
Cornelia's at an
issue.
angle with Presidente, and one thing that the staff report didn't include, but the sidewalks, and he is correct, that parking used to be allowed on Presidente. A Safe Routes to School project came in to add the bike lanes and the sidewalk in the area. So all these ADA ramps were put in as part of a Safe Routes to School program. And so most of the other intersections all got similar red curves, and we're mimicking what kind of wasn't done at that time a few years ago.
So my opinion is, though I'm very, very sensitive to anyone who has children that are physically a challenge, there are 3 spaces in the driveway plus a garage. And it's really hard to have expectations of additional parking on the street, especially now. There seems to be many, many cars on the street. So I would lean towards the safety of the 10-foot with a recommendation of trying to mitigate the situation of the driveway and the cars in the driveway so that the son could, have the drop-off of the caregiver and then pull back out safely and pick back up again, because there are 3 spaces there. I don't have a clear angle, but it does look like I can see 1 car that's sitting there. Plus, there is a 2-car garage. So I do believe there's ample parking, even though parking has been lost. But I don't think you have expectations of being able to just claim a parking spot.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else have any comments?
Yeah, I've got one question for Zach. 26 feet's an odd dimension for a drive-through parking space. This isn't one you're going to have to back into and pull in. So to err on the side of safety, I mean, it could be 22 feet, because they can pull straight into it. There's no maneuvering necessary if the red curb is made a little longer rather than shorter.
I see where you're getting with that. It's a good question. 26 feet could potentially still fit 2 smaller cars, especially with the way cars are getting
So is
smaller
that
and
what we want to
smaller.
encourage?
With the 10 feet of red curb, we don't believe it would still pose a safety issue, though. So as long as they're fitting in that full-height curb, if you had 2 smart cars that are
13-foot
small,
cars?
Golf cart, maybe?
golf carts or
I'm
this.
I'm thinking you have more cases where somebody's going to try to shoehorn themselves in and hang over, just saying, they're not going to ticket me for that.
But at
And
least,
if we made sure it was limited to 1, we might be safer. I understand exactly why you're trying to preserve parking, though.
Right.
But I'm inclined to think if we're making it a one-car space, we make it a one-car space and don't have that problem. And I have to agree with previous commissioners that we can't make parking for one, we got to make it for the whole community. And I understand that's a hard decision to make, but it may be the right one. And that's the way I'm leaning.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we have to balance, the safety of the whole neighborhood against, not to seem insensitive, but against the needs of the one. And especially when we hear that there's a three wide driveway, that it's going to be a coordination issue and maybe a challenge. But I tend to agree. I think somebody should make a motion. Do we make a motion on this?
I'd like to be heard on this issue.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, I think we will make a motion. I agree with what's been said by my fellow commissioners. And I, quite frankly, like Commissioner Crandall's idea of actually lengthening that. I think we should recommend lengthening it to 15 feet. Make that a one-car spot so people aren't hanging over. Parking on the street is first come, first serve. Lots of people jockey cars and will move a car out onto a street to have a spot available for their guests in their driveway or wherever. So I'm in support of the red curb, and I would be supportive of a motion lengthening it to 15 feet of red curb, just to make that a one-car spot. But I'm open to a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve it as is with the 10 feet, just because of the way people drive. I've seen people drive, they have such a hard time. I know it's not parallel parking, but technically it is. And I think that these guys have done the research and that the 10 feet is adequate to preserve that sight line, which is what we're trying to do here.
Is there a second?
Second.
You beat me to it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the motion to recommend to City Council for the red curb as proposed passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. So they'll still see my arguments as well, City Council?
Yeah, I would resend them to the City Council because it is going to City Council for vote. We're just making a recommendation to them. I'm sorry, we need to move on. Thank you. Next item is 7B, which is consideration of red curb extension on Camino Ferro at Via Chalupa. If staff could give us a little overview or their thoughts, and I know I have one speaker card. I don't know if there's anyone else who wants to speak on that issue as well.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Ryan Kim, Senior Traffic Engineer. I'd like to present this red curb proposals along the Camino Faro near Via Chalupa. At the Planning Commission hearings on October 19th and December 21st, 2022, the Planning Commission approved the staff's recommendations to reject the traffic calming and directed the staff to examine the intersections of possible line-of-sight problems. Based on these directions, staff has collaborated with the HOA and attempt to find the solutions to find the solutions to enhance the sight distances, especially from the Via Chalupa at Camino Faro. So, per our findings and calculations, we are proposing to add 70 feet of red curve to mark the existing red curve to 95 feet long on the south side of Camino Faro, west of Via Chalupa. And we also proposing another red curve to 95 feet of red curve to make the existing red curve to 120 feet long on the south side of the Camino Faro, east of the Via Chalupa. As you can see that in the screens, I'm ready to questions.
Thank you very much. And before we get into any questions, I just want to note for the record that we have received a couple of emails in support of written emails in support of the red curve. Does anybody have any questions for staff?
Yes. Just tell me how to pronounce your name correctly. Bunce, you got it first.
Bunce, perfect.
Excellent.
You have 3 minutes.
Cool, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Dan Bunce. I'm a resident on Via Chalupa, so I'm the second house on the east side of the street. I've been there about 5 years. It's a 4-bedroom house. I have 2-car driveway, sometimes space in the garage, and I have 5 cars. My daughter's here for college. She works late at Schwack. She's working tonight. She's going to come home late, and I want to leave a space for her not too far up the street. So a couple considerations. Couple of things. So I just had a chance to read staff report just briefly before this meeting. While I like that we've collaborated, that staff has collaborated with HOA, I think there's the statement, the HOA confirmed that parking is permitted, may not be completely accurate. I don't have a permit to park on Chalupa. So I think there are permits available for some homes on Chalupa, but not all. So guests cannot stay on Chalupa. My mother, who comes and stays 1 night a week, has to park either in the driveway if I leave her space, has a nice son, or she parks across the street if I didn't make that change. Number 2, I think extending 2 corners at 95 or 95 and 70 feet, that's a significant parking impact. That's probably 10 to 12 cars. So not everybody has Tundras. Appreciate the comment there. But if you average about 15, 16 foot a car, you know, it's probably 10, 12 cars impacted. I am curious why only at this location. I get the sight line, and I drive out this driveway, the street, every day. So I can appreciate the danger on the street, but it's not only here. It's every street coming out of this neighborhood. So I think the speed limit issue, other things that probably have been discussed previously, I wasn't part of those discussions, might be factors in that, in solving the problem, rather than taking out 95 feet more. If we look at the diagram, I think you have that up. I have it here. You've already accommodated 25 feet of red, which is more than the other spaces on the street. I'm guessing was to accommodate for that sight line originally. And now you're talking about another 95 feet up the street. I don't think there's enough reaction time anyway, if somebody's doing 30, 40 miles an hour down the street, that you're going to see them. So we're taking out a lot of room and parking without multiple seconds of reaction time. So that's my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this item? Yes, I'm looking at you, since you're the only ones left.
They're the next item.
Okay, awesome.
I recognize them.
I have a question for staff. How did you come up with these lengths of removal? You guys did like site distance study and per the traffic manual, and that's how it was determined?
Yes, we checked the site distance. Also, we considered the grade, which is 9% around, or especially for southbound directions, and the angles and the curves the faro itself has a curve, so we have some challenges regarding, in terms of the sight distances, especially.
Right. Okay. Anybody else have any questions or discussion items?
You collaborated with the HOA, right? You guys got with the HOA on this? I remember it was a big thing in the last year.
Yes, we did.
Can you tell us a little bit about those meetings with the HOA and?
Mostly they were done, we actually, after our meetings, we did have some field meetings with the HOA to talk about other potential options for the community. And then it did turn mostly into email conversations back and forth with a few of the board directors, or board members. And realistically, they were hoping that to minimize as much impact to the neighborhood as possible. And so the focus was really this most severe Chalupa intersection. So that's where most of the complaints have come in. It is definitely the most severe curve. And when you look at the exhibit, you're on the wrong side of the curve. All those other streets on the other side, you're on the outside of the curve, which actually helps your line of sight. The HOA we asked about, due to the public meeting we had before, this was a big issue, right? And so we talked about their availability to park their cars and open up their neighborhoods at night, especially. The way this community is built, there's really not very many street parking spaces on these side streets. They're all built very close together where it's almost continuous drive approaches. So when we say that parking is allowed on Via Chalupa, there happens to be a section further on the north side of Chalupa, kind of where my mouse is, where there's no houses on that side. And we were told that parking is allowed there. It doesn't sound like guests and visitors can park there though, but people in the neighborhood can park that way. So that was something we learned through this, because at first we were asking them if we could open that area up to parking to offset this red curve, knowing that the parking is a high demand in this neighborhood. So that was kind of the gist of what the HOA said, and realistically, they were just hoping to minimize it as much as possible due to the impacts.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, quick question for staff.
Sure.
Who controls the parking in the community? Is it the city or the HOA?
On Camino Faro, it is the city, it's a public street. All the other streets are private, so those are the HOA.
Okay, so the street in question is controlled by the homeowners?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Or the street with the red curb is actually the public street, so Faro is the public street. Yeah.
Does anybody want to discuss this or say how they're feeling on it? I'll kick us off. I did go visit the site. I'm familiar with this intersection. I'm supportive of the red curb as shown. We do have 2 email letters in support of it, talking about the danger of trying to get out from there. I'm supportive of it, as recommending it as designed.
I think we had a, pretty large meeting with a lot of the neighbors before. I do understand, what the gentleman's talking about, but this is really a problem with the HOA because people cannot park. There's inadequate parking within the residential area. And I'm sure there's a system where you can get permits. But unlike other so-called planned developments, like up in Talega, there are very few public arterials. Most of them are controlled by the HOA and you just cannot park. Even on the public arterials, a number of them you just can't park. So you don't have the option of trying to get off your neighborhood, to park. So I think this is a pretty good solution from what the previous meetings that we had when there are a lot of, people out. So I think I'm in favor, and we just say that the HOA really needs to work on some better internal parking situation.
Okay, anyone else, or anyone want to make a motion?
I'll move to approve as presented.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Item passes 7-0. So that's a recommendation to City Council. Moving, thank you. Moving on, we have a public hearing, item 8A, architectural permit 23-079, Krogus Residence, second story ADU, 205 Avenida Miramar. And with that, I will open the public hearing. And do we have a staff report?
Mr. Carrillo is setting up the PowerPoint right now, and he will begin his presentation in just a second.
And before we hear from staff, can we have any disclosures and/or conflicts of interest that anyone needs to put on the record?
I would like to disclose that I was at the property and viewed the front and the back from the street and took a photo.
Okay.
And we did receive a letter from Colts.
Yeah, we have received a letter from Larry Culbertson regarding,
Do we don't need to disclose if we're on design review, because that's a public meeting, right?
No, and it's also in the staff report that this
Yeah,
went
okay.
through design review, so that's perfectly fine.
And can I ask a question now before we get any further? I only see 2 photos of the property, and it doesn't show where, in the photos, the garage part. Are there any photos of the garage? I actually took a photo of the garage area and the property line. It would be very helpful if the balance of the commissioners could actually see. I could pass my cell phone down. You do? It's not in the packet. It would be very helpful, thank you.
I apologize, Commissioner Laffer. If it's appropriate, we can also bring up Street View using Google Maps during discussion if necessary.
Am I allowed to pass my cell phone of the photo down to show the rest of the commissioners? Yes?
Or email the photo?
And I also think that we were, hold on one second. So we, did you hand something over as well?
I have a photo of the garage.
Do we want to take a break and, so we can get that to the commissioners?
I have numerous photos actually on my phone.
well, I would think we could just pass it down while the
Okay.
item's going on.
Okay.
We're ready for a staff report.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. David Carrillo, Assistant Planner. So the project is located at 205 Avenida Miramar. Here's 2 images showing the physical setting of the property. The image to the left shows the property highlighted in yellow and its proximity to T Street shown in blue. And the image to the right is a close-up aerial view of the property. So the request before you is an architectural permit for the construction of a second-story ADU above a rear detached garage on a historic property which deviates from the objective ministerial ADU standards. Some background on the property. The building was constructed in 1926, and again, it's on the city's list of designated historic resources, and it's also under a Mills Act contract. Its zoning is residential medium and coastal zone overlay, and it's also within the coastal exclusion order area. However, since an ADU is involved, it still requires a coastal commission review, and this is also added as a condition of approval. So ADU law at state level requires that cities consider or permit ADUs which meet state law and objective city standards. Discretionary review is allowed when ADUs do not meet objective standards. In response to this, the city of San Clemente has adopted a process where a an owner can apply for an architectural permit requesting deviations from the objective ADU standards. So to help understand these two scenarios on the screen and how ADUs can be proposed, scenario one is where we have an ADU on historic property which complies with the objective standards. In this case, this would be a ministerial review, meaning that there's no planning commission or design review required. Scenario two, it's an ADU on a historic property which does not comply with the objective standards. So this would require a discretionary review if the applicant wishes to apply for an architectural permit. And in this case, review by the Planning Commission and Design Review Subcommittee would be required. And that's where we're at today, scenario two. So the proposed height of the ADU above the garage is 20 feet in total. Proposed setbacks, we have a front setback of approximately 65 feet as measured from the front property line. The east side setback is 1 foot 6 inch, and this is highlighted in red to show the only deviation from this project. The west side setback is approximately 20 feet, and the rear is at 4 feet 8 inches. The distance between buildings is compliant at 5 feet, and the lot coverage will not change since it's above the existing detached garage, so it remains at 39.4%. No additional parking is proposed since parking is not required for this project, given that there are 0.5 of a mile from a radius from a transit stop. Proposed materials for the ADU consist of two-piece clay tile roof, white stucco, we got wood windows, doors, and exposed rafter tiles, and black wrought iron railing. So this project did go before the Design Review Subcommittee, and on the screen we have comments that staff and the applicant received. One of the comments was to remove the cantilevered portion of the second story and the gable vents that was at the front elevation. There was also comments to provide exposed rafter tiles and an analysis on the Secretary of Interior Standards. The applicant was open to the comments and addressed every comment, and they did provide an analysis against the Secretary of Interior Standards, which staff is in support of. We did add a condition, 2.6, to further support the Secretary of Interior Standard number 9, which talks about differentiating between the old and the new. And I have that as a backup slide if you want to review that language. So here's a side-to-side comparison showing the before and after. On the left is the ADU that was before the Design Review Subcommittee, showing the cantilevered portion, the gable vent, and no rafter tiles. And on the right, we see the adjustments made. And here's another before and after. This would be the front elevation as viewed from the street. So the project would support San Clemente's objective to increase the number of accessory dwelling units. The project also provides compatible building placement and massing to adjacent properties, and that the ADU is proposed within the existing footprint of the accessory garage structure. The project also uses traditional Spanish colonial revival materials and colors for compatibility with the existing development. And the project is located at the rear of the property, which maintains a single-story pedestrian character at the front of the property. So given staff's analysis in the report, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission determine the project is categorically exempt from the requirements of CEQA and approve the project subject to conditions of approval. And this concludes my presentation, and we do have the property owners available for any questions, along with staff.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
So the next door neighbor on the west, there appears that They're also encroaching in the side setback, directly adjacent to the garage? Is that, do you know, or?
The neighbor, I'm not sure of the
I
status of
saw a
that.
photo, I don't know if it's floating around here.
It was on her phone, I think.
Google mapping or no?
Oh, yeah, here's
That's
it.
the garage, that's apartment house.
That's an apartment?
Yeah, next to it.
Okay. So are
there's a-
they
there's-
also encroaching in the side setback? Or
The
no?
property on the left of the garage?
Yeah, the west.
No, he's at 4 feet and a couple inches
Oh, yes,
on
okay,
his walkway, yeah.
okay. So
Yeah, he's
the
not-
setback is 4 feet over there,
The
too.
setback is 4 feet.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Existing garage is two-car garage?
No, the existing garage is basically 1.5-car garage. And we have approximately 5 parking spaces from the street to the garage as well.
Where would the second floor end up as in relation to the apartment building next door with the 2 windows there? Would it block their view?
Yes, the second store George's one window will be looking into the side.
Okay, but would it prevent them from looking out? I mean, they'll look directly into the wall?
Yeah, they would end up looking directly into the wall.
And that fence, like a pony wall, and then you have the wood framing, and that's 9 foot
At the very front?
next to the garage there, on the property line?
No, the fence is 6 foot.
6 foot. And is that going to be raised at all?
No.
Thank you.
Chair, can we have, if we're going to have the applicant, have him introduce himself since he's at the podium?
Yeah, I was gonna, actually, if you
about
could, yeah, you're
That was my fault.
super eager, and we're happy to talk to you. If you could hang on for just a second. Does anybody else have any questions for staff?
The one picture that had the parked car right in front of the stoop to the house, is that permitted? Like the front door of the front of the house, even in our picture here. That one car's not parked in the driveway. Is that legal park?
Is that directly in front of the porch? Technically, that's not legal parking. I did review that with with Zach, the assistant city engineer, and we did not find any permits approving that as legal parking. The curb cut has been there at least since 2007. That's the latest. That's furthest back we were able to go using Street View, but technically per code it is not legal parking.
I want to ask one question.
It's for staff or
I will
for the
ask.
applicant? Okay.
Question for them. But the garage and driveway are legal non-conforming, correct?
Correct. Yes, the garage does not have compliant parking dimensions.
Did you have a question?
It's on
Commissioner
that,
Cosgrove?
it's on that point. So the letter we received is kind of raising the point that staff should be bringing into conformity non-conforming elements of the property. What do you think about that? What's the position of staff on that?
Well, in this case, we're reviewing an ADU, right, which is subject to separate standards and provisions.
So if it were the
we-
main property, then this would apply.
What would apply again?
Not an ADU, yeah. He's saying because it's an ADU, it's
Doesn't-
different.
Yeah, okay,
That's the only reason it's in front of us.
yeah,
Right.
Had the setback.
yeah, okay.
Okay, no other questions for staff at this
The
time?
design review made what do you call those, where the wood comes out from your roof?
Cantilever, oh,
No,
yeah.
my biggest concern is having no setback is fire. And design review has kind of put wooden projectiles out there, so, but I guess they're using wood anyways, with or without the. That was what I mean.
It's an architectural element.
No, it's wood, right?
Yeah,
Plaster's pretty hard to burn, but wood is what gets you Because we can't force them to have any kind of parapet wall or any. Change the roofing to where you'd have a firewall, but you do have tile roof, but the extending wood pieces don't go along with the fire protective wall.
It's a Whitford building.
Yeah, well, so you don't have a question for staff at the moment, right? We can talk about discussion.
Well, I mean, we do have some safety issues, so you can turn things down. You don't have to, it's come before us, so there are some issues for health and safety.
Yeah, I'm,
It's just,
all I'm suggesting is that we all battle that out or discuss it during commission discussion, not when we're still in Q&A and haven't heard from the public yet.
Also, Chair and Commissioners, David can expand upon the DMT process that this project went through, where it was reviewed by the Building Division, the Orange County Fire Authority, other public safety entities that would have input on that.
Okay, David, would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not too lengthy, but yes, the project went through the development management team review process. There were 2 rounds of review, and OCFA was present at those 2 meetings, and along with the building official. So they do understand that this project will have to go through the building permit process, and in that, they'll be required to provide fire-rated materials.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a question?
David, I know you're familiar with the design guidelines. These rafter tails that are shown on this package, do you think they comply with the design guidelines?
That's a good
question.
Yeah, that's a good point. They do seem a little too far apart from one another.
And narrow and deep, and there are guidelines for the proportions of depth and width of rafter tails.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Guidelines.
If desired, we can add a condition to address that. If desired, we can add a condition to address that.
Would be one way to do it.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff at this time? Okay, then we will be excited to hear from the public. I assume that you and she are the applicant? Is that accurate?
Yes, my name's Lars Krogius. My wife and I are the applicants.
Okay,
For
so as the applicants, you have 10 minutes to speak on and sell your project to us.
Okay. Well, first, we'd like to thank David and the planning department for helping us through this project. It's been 6 months of going back and forth and trying to figure out the best thing to do for this historic property. I'd like to thank you, commissioners, for taking a look at it. And so, first of all, Stephanie and I love and appreciate the history and historic relevance of San Clemente. When we had the opportunity to purchase an Ole Hansen property, we were excited to restore the home and contribute to the historical preservation of the community and eventually make it our home. We take this responsibility very seriously. We corrected all the existing Mills Act deficiencies, which we inherited with the property. The project was more extensive than we had ever imagined, but in the end, we feel we have preserved an important part of San Clemente history. Our approach to the ADU will be the same. We will follow the guidelines set forth by the Secretary of the Interior, maintain the character of the property, and getting to the rafter tails, the property itself is all rafter tails around it, and that's why, and the existing garage has rafter tails. So that's why I think when we were in design review, rafter tails were an important part of bringing the same character of the garage that mimics the character of the house. That being said, we will maintain the character of the property, which is our primary goal. We will comply with all the historical requirements, including using the existing roof, taking it off, storing it, putting it back on when the property is done. We will actually build a structure inside the garage to actually support the second floor so that none of the 4 walls of the garage are touched, so that, in essence, if the ADU has to be taken down in the future, we can take it down, put the roof back on the garage, and the historical properties have still remained. We're not going to build any structure using the existing structure to support the second floor. We're going to reuse, obviously, we'll reuse all the materials possible that we can, including the roofing, and the windows will be custom-made to match the windows that exist in the house, so that there's consistency through both the existing house and the project. We went to great lengths to restore this house back to its early days, and I don't know if any of you are familiar with the house over the 30 years that the prior owners had it, but they had just really let it just deteriorate. And when we purchased it, we didn't really realize it was going to be as extensive as it turned out to be. But we dug in, and now it's a beautiful home for my wife and myself, and for our kids when they come visit. So we hope that you look at the plans and see that the historical home has been completely restored, and all we're asking is that we can mimic something in the garage and build an ADU and get some extra space. And with that, I guess if you have any more questions for me, I'm happy to answer anything.
I have a question. Is the garage, was that constructed at the same time as the house, or do you know when the garage was constructed?
I believe from the early pictures, the one photo I have from the early 1930s shows a garage on the property with the house. So I believe it was all constructed at the same time, especially seeing how they made the foundation of the garage. It doesn't look like it would have been able to be built any time later.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Oh, I have one other thing to add, though. With so far as the fire authority and that, the garage is currently fully sprinklered, and fire authority has obviously said the ADU itself will be fully sprinklered as well. The house, when we renovated the house, we fully sprinklered the entire house. So we brought it up to 2023 standards as far as fire codes and that within the property.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions for the applicant? Please.
So there's been some discussion about the detailing, the historic detailing, and having to do specific with the rafter tails. And you said it's your intent to meet the strict guidelines for those rafter tails.
Oh, absolutely. It's going
Okay.
to.
So if there's a suggestion that condition is put on the approval, you don't have a problem with that?
Oh, no, none whatsoever.
Okay. Well, and I would point out, as I'm sure you know, that in this case, San Clemente has their own design guidelines, not the Secretary of Interior standards. They're different. Okay? Any other questions or discussion of this item? Well, yeah, we've heard from the applicant, and we can discuss it, or you just want to make a motion?
We have to take any public comments.
Well, we did. Is there anybody else that was wanting to speak on this? Councilman Loeffler, perhaps? Okay.
He looks down at his phone.
Zach Ponson, did you want to speak on this? Okay. Anyone hiding between the rows? I don't think there's anyone else.
I'm sorry, did we receive a written public comment? Or no, on this one?
I mentioned that we have a written
Oh, we
comment
did,
from...
okay, I apologize.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
I did too. That's
Okay,
question about it.
great.
I'll go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Ed, this won't be a back and forth while we're having discussions on, so you can sit down, that's fine. But as he knows, at design review, we had lengthy discussion on continuing and increasing the nonconformance. And taking that into, their goal was to cover the whole garage with ADU and encroach in the side yard setback, and that's why this is in front of us right at the moment. Had they taken the option, or if it was available to them, to continue and move the ADU to the right and meet the 4-foot setback, am I correct, John? We wouldn't even be seeing this.
That's correct.
Because there'd be no discretionary, so really, the reason we have some discretion is the fact that we are continuing, for their benefit, the non-conforming side yard setback. And does that trump the next door neighbor's rights to have a house next to them that meets the setback? And we've got to make that decision right up front, or the rest is irrelevant as far as we're concerned. And I struggled with it at design review, and I think if we can get everybody to think about that and decide if it trumps to keep the historic structure non-conforming and the ADU non-conforming as far as setback, we can push on. If we can't make that decision, that would be a recommendation, a condition of approval that it conform. So I'm curious to hear everybody's thoughts on that one issue.
I would like to weigh in, if I may. As I'm looking at the objectives and standards, I could agree with a couple of them, A, B, possibly C, but I'm struggling with D and E, the general appearance, keeping with the character of the neighborhood, and the proposal to not be detrimental to the orderly and harmonious development of the city. That second story butts right up against another residence that has two windows that they will no longer be able to use, and they're used to using them, and that does not lend to a harmonious neighborhood. So it's a beautiful piece of property, and I appreciate all of the detail added to it, but it's a very monstrous piece of property that is very close to the next property. So that's my struggle.
Can I point something out?
Mm-hmm.
Correct me, anyone, if I'm wrong, but you're bringing up, well, you're taking away view from the next door neighbor.
Air. They're taking away air from the
Okay.
next door.
Air.
Yeah, those two windows. Maybe they don't have a view. I wasn't up there, but those two windows now are looking at cement.
Okay, so, but if I'm not mistaken, if the ADU was shifted 2.5 feet or 30 inches to the right, then we wouldn't have a say. It would get approved without any discussion.
But we do have a say.
I'm pointing out a hypothetical, that if it was moved 30 inches to the right, they would have 30 more inches of air, but it would still get
Your time
approved.
is up.
Am I correct on that, or am I misspoken?
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay.
Now, they can't move it because of the trees that are there? Did I read something about? No, the garage?
Just make it smaller.
They could make it smaller.
So-
But I do appreciate your comments, though. I understand where you're going with that. But the fact is that it is before us, and this is a rare opportunity to actually weigh in on something like this. I think we should. And that is my opinion, that it's just too close to the present properties that are surrounding it.
A question for David that occurred to me. So that's an independent structure, the garage. And by adding a second story, doesn't it bring about the requirement to make that structure conforming to the setback? Or can you add on to that structure and still leave essentially the lower part of it as non-conforming?
Because it's an ADU, they can propose this without making changes to the garage.
Okay, even though it's attached directly?
Correct.
Okay.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yep.
Because it's a historical structure, wouldn't they say, no, you can't make them comply with the setback, because that would be tearing down part of the historical structure of the garage. Is that correct?
There's also some sections in the code that preserve buildings and exempt them from complying
Right.
with setbacks, yeah, for that reason.
Unless you're making a structural change to that building, which is what they're doing,
They're just.
by adding a second floor.
They've actually done a very clever thing. They're building a metal frame inside, so they're not taking down any structural walls
But they
in
are
the
altering-
garage.
They are altering the structure, technically.
They are altering the interior and the roof, but they're not altering the exterior walls of the garage. It's,
Well, I would argue that
and it's a good
taking the
argument.
roof off is a
agree.
structural, okay. That's a structural improvement.
So as long as you're on the mic, can you, did you or can you answer Commissioner Crandall's question, which is how do you feel about perpetuating and exacerbating the legal nonconforming issue?
Yeah, I think that there's an impact architecturally to the historic structure because the garage is part of the design of the overall campus, if you want to call it that. And so by adding that second level, I think you're demonstrably reducing the quality of the overall presentation, of that property. And it's a one-story project, a house. It was built to be that way. I understand the ADUs, they can get around that. But I think it needs to meet the setback requirement. And really, then we don't have anything to say about it.
Okay.
But if you're gonna just go 20 feet vertical on that garage structure, especially that close to the setback line, I think it's a mistake.
Okay, thank you.
We've already had two cases that we've approved before but they weren't second stories, I don't think, unless one was, where the garage already. Did you turn your mic on? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Good for paying attention. That we've had two cases. One I can distinctly remember where they were just renovating the garage for an ADU. And it was non-conforming, and they didn't have to change the non-conformance. We still let them, do it. The other one I think might have been a little bit different, but I know there definitely was that one. So my biggest concern was if we did shift it 2.5 feet to the right, then I think we run into problems of how close it gets to the existing house, don't we? Or that stairway that they have planned. Because then I think the stairway, if you were to shift it 2.5 feet, how close is the house is pretty close to the garage.
Stairway come up
Yeah.
the other direction.
Does it affect the landing of the stairway? Does the building structure then get too close to the existing house?
Well, you might have to wrap this, I mean, yeah, I don't know, we don't know, but, I mean, they might have to do the stairway in a different, start in the back and come up and
My only
wrap.
point was, I don't think the issue anymore really is that we have a legal non-conforming with the setback being incorrect, because we know the state now, gives us, or supersedes us, I was gonna say something else, but we no longer have control of that. So the only control we have is what's on top, and whether or not it meets, and I do understand they're asking for an exemption, that's why they're here. Are we gonna slide it or not slide it? If we slid it, what problems are we causing with the closeness to the house and the landing of the
It's not relevant.
stairs?
It's not relevant.
Why we can have them shift it, they're asking to keep it
So
flush.
then they can do it. They don't need our approval.
Right.
But we can say no.
Unless they can't fit in the stairwell, or if the building comes too close to the house.
But that's predicated totally on the size of the building they want to build.
That's right.
So they've set the priorities and created those
Correct.
limitations.
That's right. It's throwing it back into their lap.
So
I'm
to
not totally
answer,
against it, but that's one thing we should consider.
Well,
They're
absolutely, we
asking
should
for that
consider everything.
exception, and they can, if that's what we think is, because I think on the other ones where we did it, we did make them, I think on the one garage, that one where it was next to another house, they were willing to offset, and they did.
So-
It wasn't two-story, though, I don't think. I think it was
So-
single.
Dr. McCacken, so how do you, are you able to answer Bart's question right now? Are you supportive of allowing them a 1.5 foot setback, or do you want to see them have a conforming setback?
Well, I'd like to hear what everybody else thinks. I
Okay.
mean,
I'm fine
If
with
I
that.
was the fireman that said, well, they're sprinklered, and that's one thing that probably satisfies the fire department. But if somebody is on the other side and the fire goes up and hits those rafters, then they're gonna burn when they would have been, 2.5 feet farther away. So it's tough. I mean, the state's putting us in the music box.
Well, this is when we get to decide on.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll come back to you. Commissioner
Come back to me.
Cosgrove, do you can you answer Bart's question?
Yeah. So this is a variance. I'm okay with it. Here's why. I had the privilege of sitting in through the presentation, through design review, where they had a different design, and it was actually much larger. It was cantilevered on the side towards their house and also in the front. And, we listened to their passion for their property. We listened to their purpose for why they wanted to do that. And we said, you know what? That's too much. And we said, if you can keep it within the constraints of the garage, the symmetry will be there, it will make more sense. And while we didn't really discuss the setback as a decision maker, because we know we're advisory only, at that time, I made my peace with the fact that 2.5 feet to their neighbor on the other side, I don't think makes that big of a difference. And the fact that they're there after they had already built their building, I don't think they should be penalized. I feel somewhat supportive for families that have these historical homes, and they're somewhat hamstrung on what they can do with their property. They have to pay a lot into the maintenance of it and all the rest. So I think with all the work that they have done on this particular property to renovate it, revive it, this is something we can be flexible on as a give and take as part of the process. So that's my feeling on it.
I'll weigh in my feelings and we can keep going down the line. I agree with everything Commissioner Cosgrove said 100%. They did scale it back. I'm looking at their floor plan and that's just a tight little unit as it is, and if they have to shrink it or shift it, I think shifting it to the right, they could maybe only shift part in the back where it doesn't push up against the house, so then it's funky shaped, and I think this is a good design. I think, the other neighbor put their building up 2 stories tall, 4 feet from the property line, and they did it to these people.
But it was conforming.
Okay,
It meets the rules.
that's fine. The neighbor didn't show up to object their opinions, and presumably they were public noticed. Were they public noticed, can we assume?
Apartment house.
We can confirm that.
Okay, but I think we can assume that.
Then I'm confirming that public noticing was done appropriately pursuant to the
Yeah,
code.
so I'm personally supportive of the project as designed and as altered at the request of Design Review Subcommittee. You already weighed in?
Well, let me weigh in again.
Sure.
They're gonna put something on top of that garage.
That's right.
And though I'm all for preserving the historical nature of that site, I'm not sure that pushing it over 2.5 feet is gonna do that. So I can see now after hearing from Commissioner Cosgrove that they did make some improvements on what was presented to DRSC. So I'm inclined to approve what they're requesting. Change my mind. Is that okay?
You're allowed to. Right up until you vote. You can change again.
Well, I have to say, I played devil's advocate, and I saw you swallow deeply when I brought this up, but I wanted to make sure it was fully vetted, that how many people were comfortable with encroaching on adjacent property with 23 feet of 18-foot wall. Because that's what we're doing. And if that's a consensus, we can move on from that point.
I would like to
But
weigh
I want to
in.
be very careful about, Cameron said, this is a variance. Problem is, a variance has to have cause why you have to do it, and it's got to be a physical constraint of some sort. And I don't think this would meet a variance finding. But to provide protection for the historic versus protecting the adjacent neighbor, that may outweigh it. And that's kind of what I was looking for from everybody to see what the consensus of opinion is.
I just wanted to have a little further discussion. If it wasn't 2 stories and it was a single story, I could go with this. I think it would look better. It would fit in the community, and I believe it would, historically, would meet all the bullet points. But because it's massive, in my opinion, that's just my opinion, when I'm looking at it, and I was there to see the footprint and how it goes way up, and it, to me, it encroaches on the neighbors, and that is not harmonious, nor does it looks awkward to me. And I apologize, I'm not an architect, so I'm just visually looking at it. And then it butts up against residents that would like to open up the window but now have a 20-foot or taller block wall that they open up their windows to. No, I understand no one has a right to a view here, but they do have a right to live in a harmonious environment, and, well, I'll just leave it at that, and have good neighbors. And I just think it's a massive piece of work that needs to be downsized. And whether you move it one way or the other, it's too tall, too much of a beast, and doesn't fit the profile of the house in front of it, which I was hoping it was going to match. But I could fully support an ADU if it was 1 story and fit within the profile. And that, I can't change my mind on that, because I went out and looked at it, and it just doesn't fit. It looks nice, but it looks nice on a different property, not on that property.
You know, the people next door currently, they might not have recognized the notice or whatever, but once this goes in and a variance is given, it goes on forever. So in my opinion, you could shift this thing 2.5 feet over and probably not be that big a deal to the property owner. They'll still be able to get their ADU. They'll still be able to add that square footage, and then you could still give the people down the road and the grandkids or people that are moving there in 2050, you could still give them their space that they deserve. We're making a decision that's going to last 100 years. And why are we doing that? Why would we give that variance? Is it detrimental to their project? Is it a design? Can they still have an ADU if they move it over 2.5 feet? And would that give it a little variance with a little, like in the backside there, you see that little roof? That actually gives it some dimension and character? I don't see why, personally, I don't see why we can't shift it over. And the stairs, I understand, but there's all kinds of different ways to enter a building with stairs. And so, my opinion in respect to future generations, you know, I as long as they conform to the setback, no problem. But why is there a variance? Is it going to disallow them from utilizing their property? No. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. So, Commissioner Crandall, we fleshed out answers to your questions.
It sounds like we've got a mixed bag. I mean, if I was convinced that this was the only way to do it, I'd probably lean towards it, but if you took that same ADU and turned it 90 degrees and made it an L, pulled back, the downside is it would crowd their backyard, which is what they're doing to the neighbor. Because in the future, it may not be an apartment next door. If that thing's taken down and somebody builds something there where there's a backyard, this will be right there basically on the property line. I've never even liked 4-foot side yards. 5-foot is what I grew up with all through my career. That was pretty much the standard because firemen wanted to pull their hoses down there. So if we, I'm still of the opinion, if we come to a point where we say, and maybe we do a straw vote, that we're comfortable with continuing the nonconformance, I'll go with the crowd and then we'll make the design comments to do the best we can with that. But I see that there's still some other options. We knew that when they had the front cantilevered, if you look at it, it crowded their house and the corner of the property. If it turned 90 degrees, so you had the existing roof remain on the garage, and this thing was over and cantilevered into their backyard, it could work. Or they could convert the garage to an ADU, which is another option. If it's not going to be used as a garage and they want to continue to use the parking below in the driveway, because it's a hard garage to get into already. I mean, we know it. You got to kind of snake around the house a little bit to utilize it. But so I think there are ways to get an ADU without impacting the adjacent property owners quite that much.
Okay, so it strikes me that we ought to give Dr. McCacken a chance to weigh back in.
I don't think we've ever given this exception before. I think that's one thing I can't recall one. The one where we, oops. I think that maybe this is the first exception of the second story encroaching, because I think the second story one that we had, besides that garage that was converted, that we all had the problem with, that we could do nothing about, this is probably the first time that we're allowing the second story not to be slid.
Okay, so how do you feel about that?
So if there's any other alternative, because once we do this, then they can say we've done it before. Sound like Pandora's box. I understand what they're in, but there are other, it was their decision to come to us when that was kind of brought up, and I have that concern, plus just the concern of there's the aching pain internally, and it's not their fault, of the state just superseding our ability, and this is one area where we still have control. But if you make the decision, you're kind of giving it away, because then you're going to have to say, why are you giving it to them, and you're not going to give it to the guy down the street. Not that I'm against it, but that's just what it allows. Staff will then have precedent to administratively say, well, we've done it before, now you can do it again.
It's easy to say, okay, this was given the historical nature of the thing, we didn't want to, this is a historical structure. That puts it in a whole separate category of why. But go ahead, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, that's just sort of it. I think this is a first, just like that garage was the first time, but that was, we had no alternative with the garage. There was something else, I think it was the historical nature of it. Here, it's not necessarily the historical, it's actually city code,
Okay, so if we were to follow Commissioner Crandall's suggestion and take a straw vote of, why don't you word the straw vote?
Just how many are in favor of continuing and allowing the second story addition to continue the nonconformance?
Okay, so let's just go individually. Does everyone understand the question? Okay.
To continue to allow it?
Basically approve it with a 1.5-foot setback. Are you supportive of doing that, yes or no? That's the question. Commissioner Loeffler? Prescott Loeffler?
I'm not in support of that, but I could be in support of an ADU, a garage ADU, just not the second story.
Okay, thank you. Dr. McCacken?
I think at this point, no.
Thank you. Commissioner Cosgrove?
I'm still leaning in favor of it simply because the garage is already there, so, yeah, yes.
Thank you. I'm in favor of it as proposed, based on the location of the garage. Commissioner Camp?
I'm also in favor.
Thank you. Commissioner Crandall?
I'm a no at this point.
Thank you. Commissioner Davies?
I think there's other ways that they could obtain a second-story ADU, so I'm not in favor of encroaching in that setback.
Okay, thank you. So I can count to 4. So at this point, I guess I'm thinking, and I'm open to all suggestions, but let me ask you a question. Is it of any benefit to the applicant to continue the item rather than deny it?
Yes, at this time, it would be absolutely appropriate to ask the applicant if they would find benefit in continuing this item to a future planning commission meeting so that they might be able to talk with staff and explore some other options that may gain the planning commission's approval, or potentially find a solution that doesn't require planning commission review at all. But it would be staff's recommendation would be that you consult with the property owner before giving an option like that if they don't see any benefit in it.
Right, okay.
Could you also explain to them the downsides of having a denial? Are they limited to
Yes, so
their next, which I
it will be.
wouldn't want them to be in that position.
Yes, well, so the decision would be a denial with prejudice, which would be that the matter was acted upon in, as far as the merits of the request. And if that was denied, they would not be able to submit a similar application for a year. After a year, they could come back with essentially the same application, but if they, if the commission denies it without prejudice, which I'm not really sure how that would occur in this particular case, then they could submit an application sooner than a year, but that determination would have to be made as far as whether it's with or without prejudice. Staff's typical reaction to this would be to inform and encourage applicants to take the information that the Planning Commission has provided and find ways that this project could be moved forward that are more likely to garner the full support of the Planning Commission.
Okay, thanks. So, I'm sorry, sir, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd make a motion to continue this item so that the applicant before us can talk with staff and, their architect or whatever to see if there's some
I'd support that.
way to work this out without having to deny it.
Okay. I think we're probably all in favor of that, and I appreciate it, but let's talk to the applicant real quick. So, I'm sorry, sir, what's your name? First name? Lars? If you could join us at the microphone. Do you understand there's a difference between if we vote to continue the item, which gives you a chance to keep working on it and revise it, make potential revisions, versus if we deny the project, then you kind of have to start over, and you might have to wait a year to start over. Do you understand the difference?
I do understand the difference.
Okay.
But also, I understand that if I just move the house 2.5 feet, I don't come back to this meeting, right?
That's a question that you'll work out with staff I think the answer to that is yes, but you'll work that out with David Carrillo.
What I don't understand is, you know, the apartment owner next door who really has allowed his apartment and everything fall into complete disarray, and I have to look at it, and he doesn't come in and show up.
Sir,
So I don't understand that part of it.
I understand your frustration. I have some frustration too. But I think those issues you can work out with staff, or you can request to meet with any and all of us individually, separately. We're beyond the point where we're going to, so
Right.
I just want to make sure you understand. Are you okay if we approve a continuance?
Sure.
Which-
I'm okay with that.
Okay,
And
go ahead.
just one quick thought, jump in if this is an absurd thought. Are you going to be using the garage as a garage?
Our garage is used as a garage. We have a charger in there for our Tesla, and we do use the garage spaces. And we're not inclined to make it an ADU.
Well, no, if you need the storage and all, and it wasn't a car, since it's an ADU, you could have part of the ADU on the first floor. Meaning that the second floor living space would be, could be a little smaller. It just,
Yeah,
in the bag of tricks.
No, I understand where you're coming from, and we appreciate your time. And we'll sit down with David and find out if you want to table the motion, and we'll sit down and see if we're going to go forward.
You have a lot more options if we vote for continuance, which
Yeah.
is, I think, where we're leaning. So I just want to make sure you're okay with that.
And Adam, even with this, just to make full disclosure, regardless of what our decision is, you can appeal it to city
Oh,
council.
I do know that. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner McCann, can I make a comment?
Please.
Just to provide some clarification. For giving the applicant the option to come back, they will be requesting a deviation, right? That's what that means. If they do come back, there is going to be a deviation. So I just want to make sure that the commission understands that.
We don't know that they're going to request it. Well, I guess
Well, if they
you're
come
saying
back-
if it comes back, it will be with a deviation.
Right, because otherwise it doesn't come back.
Okay.
For
But
discretionary.
maybe, right.
If it comes back,
But maybe it'll be a
have to.
different deviation, or
Yeah,
a
I
lesser
think-
deviation or
I
something.
think that we're all clear on that. But just for direction's sake, if the planning commission can continue this, I don't see this coming back at the second meeting in August. It's just going to be too quick of a turnaround for us to get a staff report put together. But if we can continue this to the first meeting in September, even if for some reason it's not ready at that meeting, we can show up and ask for another continuance, so we don't have to renotice the project. One thing I will say is that David and I will personally meet with the property owners, go over options. There may be a chance that they don't need to come back, but if they do, we'll try to focus in on the planning commission's comments and help them identify a project that has a better opportunity for approval by the planning
Adam,
commission.
would it be appropriate to possibly go back to DRC?
We don't want to slow them down.
You know, I think with 2 rounds of design review and the understanding of the commission's concerns about, the main concerns being more about the, I'll say proximity to the adjacent property, I think we can forego design review for another round.
So are you suggesting that we continue it to September 6th?
I'm okay with that.
That would be my recommendation for the earliest.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think,
potential
that would be really, really hard to achieve, a redesign and get it back in time for circulation by then. I think we should continue it to the second meeting of September.
If,
How about just
I think there
continue
might be an
until staff feels it's
opportunity.
right to come back.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too.
It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be date specific.
So we do need to continue it to a date certain. If staff isn't ready, we can then continue it again. And if we're going to continue it, we need to we need to reopen the public hearing on it.
We need to what?
We need to keep, reopen the public hearing because it does have to be an open matter to
We
continue
haven't
it.
closed it.
Okay, well, we'll keep it open.
Great. So I think we should continue it to September 2nd.
Continue the hearing to
Continue the hearing to September 2nd.
Second.
I'm sorry, September 20th,
20th,
and leave the public hearing open.
open still.
So who made a motion?
Here, I did,
Is that your motion?
yes.
Okay. Who seconded it?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
And can I make one
Please.
comment that just
Please.
transpired for staff and the applicant? I was just looking at this one more time, trying to come up with a reasonable solution. If that front room, which is called ADU, were the only one on the existing wall, 18 inches from the property line, and then it jogged back for the bathrooms and everything else, I might be more comfortable that only like 11 feet was encroaching on the adjacent neighbor, rather than the full 23,
12 feet, actually. but
12 feet.
Yeah.
That might be a compromise that would work.
I
Go
would-
back, because you've got that nice roof on the back
I
of the
would
house.
just offer this, design review is at your pleasure. If we can be of assistance, bring it, but it's not required. It's an option.
Yeah, that might.
Okay, let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask it to Jenna. Did you want to say something, Adam?
We're starting to talk a lot about a project that we just closed.
Well, I'm wondering if we can reopen it.
I would recommend that we
That's
reopen
my
that
question
item.
for Jenna. Jenna, can we
Need a motion?
Yeah, so,
by vote of
So,
seven,
vote
to
to
reconsider
reconsider.
the item?
Yeah, I think that is,
Okay, I'll
That's
make a motion that
appropriate,
we.
but, yeah, we need to reopen it.
We kind of reopen this item and continue discussing it. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I have a question for you, Commissioner Crandall.
Yes.
If the applicant were to agree on the spot to keep the room ADU, the 12 foot 4 inches, or 12 foot 8 inches, if that wall, at the setback as they proposed, but then step the bathroom slash closet slash entry slash kitchen area to be 2.5 feet over to be in compliance, would that change your vote to yes?
That would probably be an acceptable compromise.
Okay, I'm saying, hang on. Would it be an acceptable compromise tonight that you would vote on tonight? If we just said, okay, as a condition, they had to
I don't
shift,
know if we can go back.
or we could just make it a condition of the project.
We should ask.
Well, I'm asking Commissioner Crandall if he would vote for that first, and then if he says yes, then I'll ask Jen if we can do it.
Well, sure, you can do it, but I think I would vote against it, because I think it
Before
needs,
he says
You already voted
yes.
against it.
I know.
Yeah, but
I
before
wouldn't vote
you
against
put
it.
him on the spot like that, I want to weigh in on it, to let him think about what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
I'd want to hear from.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to
Okay.
be open for discussion, let's have some discussion.
Yeah, I want to hear from
Okay.
everybody.
I would
Everybody
not
should
be
have their
comfortable
turn.
with that. I want to see the drawings.
you notice I didn't vote on bringing it back on the table, because I think it needs to stay with staff.
I
And then,
want to see it.
yeah,
Okay, so let's discuss the item. You're saying, Commissioner Prescott Lawful, you would want to,
I want to see what that looks like. I want to see it in relationship.
have them bring back the drawing. That's my,
Yeah, I wanna
have
see
them
the
bring it
drawing.
back. Show me
Okay.
the new design.
Yeah, I want to see it.
okay? Commissioner Cosgrove, how would you feel about that?
I'm going to agree with my colleagues here on that.
Okay, I would be okay with approving it as suggested as potential solution on the spot.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. And
Okay,
that's because I think that lower roof needs to be connected around the corner. And so there's some detailing that needs to occur. I don't think tonight we could say, just jog it and that'll be fine.
Okay.
I think we need to look at it.
That's, yeah,
Because you
that's,
still have half
that's designing
non-conforming.
from the dais, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
okay,
I concur.
okay,
In my opinion, I think we need to see it, but with that said, I don't want to give you all false hope that if you do that, it's going to be acceptable, because it's still non-conforming and setting a precedence. So that's what I'd want to convey here. Like, we could put them 6 weeks and a lot of money with architects and time and energy and effort and still have the same feelings.
Still not conforming.
Right, it's still not conforming.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the balance, and when I said it's compromise historic quality of the front elevation of the garage, and that the compromise is the back is conforming with setbacks.
Okay.
It's
Okay, so with that discussed,
Make a motion that we keep the original motion as the initial motion the same.
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The motion is recontinued to September 20th. Thank you for the discussion, everyone. It's more spirited discussion than usual.
Can we please have the photos that were considered by the commission be made part of the record, please?
So there's this one.
Is that okay,
Lars.
sir? If we get
And then
that.
there's one on my phone.
And then,
I have to email to someone.
if you could email that.
Jenna, can you just
Thank you.
Yes.
because I won't be able to connect.
You could email it to Adam, maybe.
Oh, Adam, I'm just gonna text it to you.
Interesting approach.
compromise.
Okay, no new business, no old business. Reports of commissioners and staff. Regarding the tentative future agenda, I see is listed on here. On August 16th, it says, there's nothing listed under study session, as we already discussed. Under planning commission, it says consent vacancy rate cert, but I don't see anything else on that. Are we, is there a chance that meeting is going to get canceled, or?
Good question.
There may be, so as you've noticed, there's been a number of public works projects related to parking and traffic. There may be some of those projects that will end up on this agenda. The vacancy rate certification is something that we need to do on a yearly basis. So even if that's the only item on the agenda, we're likely going to keep that one.
Okay. Wonderful. Then we all get another opportunity to see each other. Any other comments or
Just for,
reports?
Oh,
Adam,
and my
Want to do
apologies.
the
Since we're-
elections for
Exactly.
members for both design review and commission.
Yes, so I apologize. We had inadvertently placed that on the July agenda. I was out last week and I asked staff to move it to this meeting's agenda, but there was a communication breakdown and that didn't happen. So the selection and appointment of the planning commission chair pro tem and vice chair are and the design review subcommittee member selections will all occur at the next meeting as well. So that will be on that agenda.
Okay. Anybody have anything to report or discuss?
Just because everybody asked me, is there any news
Oh, yes, I agree.
on the bowling alley?
The Miramar.
Miramar.
Yeah, so, let's see, I've heard Jonathan Lightfoot give an update on this a number of times in various public meetings recently. I believe that the latest on this is that they have essentially a new financial partner has come in. They've selected a new general contractor. That general contractor is going through the process of cleaning up the site and getting structural review of the work that's already been done to determine what, if anything, needs to get redone due to the exposure during the rainy season. But that, I believe, is getting very close to starting to go. I think the general contractor at this point is just working on getting the bids and the subs lined up to begin their work.
So it's back on track, basically.
Yes, at this point in time, there is a there is an active group working on this project, and I want to say within the next couple weeks, maybe a month and a half or so, we should be expecting to see quite a bit more activity on the project.
All right, thanks.
Do you think we could remove the old tattered plastic coverings that are flapping in the wind?
Yeah, that is something that they're going to address. There's a number of just site maintenance issues that they need to deal with, and that is something that city staff has talked with them about specifically.
Is there an update on that gym? Are they still pursuing by In-N-Out? Can I ask that?
Sure.
The gym.
The gym that was
One
going to
we
take over
approved
24-hour
about
fitness?
6 weeks
Oh.
ago.
Yeah, I haven't heard recently where that is as far as how close they are to getting that project up and running. But we can reach out to the applicants and get a status update, and I can email the commission with updates on that.
I just hope they don't abandon that. I think it'd be a good, if it works out.
Anchor tenant in there.
Yeah.
I'm open to a motion to adjourn August 16th.
I make a motion to adjourn to August 16th.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.